I think this concept of figure and ground is a good format for talking about AI.
Okay. It comes from the Gestalt psychology people who were active. Actually, Figure Ground, there was, I think, a 2-volume big fat book by Niels Bohr's good friend. I always forget his name. He's the guy who came up with that picture of, it looks like it could be a goblet or two faces.
Mm-hmm.
But he wrote the book, this huge tome about figure and ground relationships, figure and ground reversals, that kind of thing. But the other concept they have is closure.
Mm-hmm.
That every perception is a closure. So there's a central part, the central object that is defined in the act of closure, but it expresses a whole environment, a whole context. It needs a context in order to have a meaning.
So it can't be everything.
Well, it is everything.
How?
In a couple of ways.
If there is a closure and a context, everything cannot have a context.
Anything that can be known has the shape, which is the same shape, which is the shape of a closure. Anything that can be known has the shape of a closure. And so if we're going to know everything, then we have to pick up everything, one thing at a time, dignify it as a thing in this act of severing it from its environment, making it the thing that stands out, the focal.
Right, so it can never be everything.
Everything is always what it isn't. In order to know what anything is, you have to know what everything is. And so it's the monster version of the chicken and the egg which came first. It's an insoluble problem. But it isn't. It's another classic way of phrasing it is you talk about the Hermeneutic Circle. One of my favorite examples has been these psychological experiments. You isolate part of the visual field. It's a particular color, but as soon as you isolate it, it isn't a particular color. It is only given the color that it is by the colors around it.
Yes.
By the background.
Mm-hmm.
And you can take exactly the same physical, you can get your light meters and you can sample it and you can get the spectrum and you can find the luminance profile is exactly this, and you can take exactly the same thing, put it in a different context and have it read as a completely different color. It can go to green to orange,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good example.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
And then logic has a real problem with that because logic doesn't like circles.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the vicious circle principle, but it is the hermeneutic circle that gives meaning to anything, is everything. So that we can take this color patch in the field, the visual field, and we can say, well, it depends for the color that we interpret it as on the color patches around it, and then we look at each of those color patches and we have to do the same procedure with those.
Yeah.
And we eventually discover we can't know what any color is.
Mm-hmm.
And that color cannot exist, except that of course it does.
Yes.
And that's a synecdoche of our embeddedness in an environment.
Mm-hmm.
We get our meaning from our environment, but we don't know it. We just think that we're a color patch. Oh yeah, I'm red. We don't realize that, no. You are the whole thing, right? Mm-hmm. It takes the whole thing for there to be anything. So how do you get started? And Google is a good example here because they did nothing fancier than create an index of everything. Any text, so Tim Berners-Lee creates this frame in which text can appear magically. It's an open invitation. Anybody can now be a publisher. So whatever you want, go ahead, do it.
Yeah.
And it catches on for some weird, inexplicable sociological reason. And then Google comes along, half a decade later or so, and creates one of any number of search engines, but theirs is distinguished by being a little simpler. It's got this appealing look to it. It's not jazzing it up. And so it survives, and the others fall by the wayside. So its success enables it to become more successful, and it loops on that loop for a while until it has created in itself an artificial intelligence that swallowed the whole planet. And I think the people who in charge of Google kind of recognize what they have there. At some point it dawned on them, oh, this is actually that AI that they were talking about. In fact, we've already done it. So all this talk now about artificial intelligence, it is a little bit beside the point. Because the AI the size of the planet, that swallowed the whole planet, it's already there. Mm-hmm. We woke up inside it and didn't even realize it. So we are it. It's like that old Pogo comic strip. We have met the enemy, and it is us. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So at the same time that artificial intelligence was getting defined, AI gets defined. I think it was Ross Ashby came up with something, well, he was much more interested in IA, which is intelligence amplification. Let's take the existing intelligence that we know about, i.e. us, and we can use a body of, computer techniques and this and that and the other thing, and enhance our own intelligence. So now they're talking about actually, brain implants, and so in fact Elon Musk, he's just vowed to put hundreds of millions of dollars into neural prostheses and that kind of thing.
Yes.
To because seeing that this is the direction where AI and IA will having bifurcated back in around 1956, they can sort of come back together. Mm-hmm. Because the computers get small enough and they get cheap enough. I mean, we have video cameras now. How many cell phones are there in the world? How many billions of cell phones are there? Well, that's how many video cameras there are. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You could wallpaper the whole joint, Mm-hmm. The million eyes of Dr. Mabuse, It's absurd, but there it is. This universal surveillance, and anyway, there's this great line from Freud. He had this great line that we are the prosthetic gods, which has, this kind of conflicting moral sense to it, like, okay, we can make ourselves into gods by bolting on, artificial devices and prostheses and so on. But it also means that we're crippled. I don't know what this has to do with artificial intelligence. And any time I start really thinking about it like this, it just, for me, it always comes back to like, well, can't we treat people more kindly? Can't we do that? And I think it really comes, like this morning's question about Polanyi, and you have these two brothers, and although they didn't actually talk to each other, and they sort of represented, that they felt they were like antithetical. But they were both concerned with things that do come together in this issue right now of this artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
You know, can we articulate human expertise? Or a human-like expertise? Hopefully, I mean, like the idea is it's somehow going to improve things. But it is, in actual terms, it's in the service of an economic juggernaut, a system,
Mm-hmm.
You know, these days in the political sphere, like the reason anything happens is because of the economy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the economy did it. And it's the ideology is that it's autonomous, that it just does what it will. Right? And we're along for the ride. And it brings the business cycle with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it brings wars with it and revolutions and, you know. But somehow it's the right thing, that we should just trust this insane, out of control express train hurtling. Nobody knows where it's going. No, we can see doom on every side, you know. We're just hanging on by the skin of our teeth, you know. It's crazy. So I think that's, rather than machine consciousness, we should really ask, is it possible for humans to become conscious? You know, is that possible? Can we collectively become conscious? Because I think that's the real question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's this trope about God that, you know, not a sparrow falls, but that God is not there witnessing it, you know? Actually participating in it. Why not, you know? Like, nothing will pass the unceasing vigilance of God, right? Many people are very paranoid about the surveillance state. You know, the NSA, the No Such Agency, is listening to every telephone call on the entire planet, listening in on, you know, looking through every camera, you know. It is like that old sort of crappy movie. Who was it? Fritz Lang made this film called The Thousand Eyes of Dr. Mabuse. You know, this guy has this hotel and he spies on people, and it's like, oh, that's creepy, right? But you have this American government organization that spies on everybody.
Yeah.
And it's got an unlimited budget. Nobody knows how big that budget is. It's crazy. And why is it doing it? Nobody knows. It's always been this way, right? It's what we do.
Yeah.
So, but the flip side of that is that, you know, it is this synthetic God or this prosthetic God. That's the other interpretation of Freud's little phrase, is that we build an artificial God as a prosthesis for ourselves, for our own, to help look after us.